Welcome to Supply Chain Management. Today, we're tackling a core distinction in the field, the difference between demand planning and forecasting. Get this wrong, and you're left with misaligned inventory and millions in wasted capital sitting in warehouses. Our learning objective is to separate analytical prediction from cross-functional alignment within the sales and operations planning cycle. To start, I want to pose a coaching challenge. Let's call it the accuracy paradox. If your statistical forecasting algorithm achieves 95% accuracy, does the broader demand planning process become obsolete? Answering that requires us to break down the hard limits of mathematical models and why human strategic alignment actually runs the supply chain. Let's start with definitions under the formal APICS framework, beginning with forecasting. Forecasting is the process of estimating future demand. It relies entirely on historical data, mathematical models, and statistical assumptions. The specific output is just a number, a baseline demand. It attempts to answer one simple question: what do we think will happen? Demand planning operates on an entirely different scope. It is a broader business process designed to align that demand with actual supply chain decisions. It takes that statistical forecast and combines it with market intelligence and human collaboration. This process forces us to answer a much more active question: what demand should we plan for, and how do we respond? A statistical baseline is passive. A consensus demand plan is an active organizational commitment. Let's deconstruct how these two functions operate differently in a real business environment. Look at this matrix. Forecasting predicts demand, whereas planning aligns it with strategy. The forecast is analytical. The demand plan is collaborative. Forecasting uses historical data. Planning overlays marketing and strategy. Analysts own forecasts. Leadership co-owns the final plan. Forecasts are short-term. Planning is long-term. When you look at these characteristics together, a structural truth emerges. Forecasting is just a single step, while demand planning is an end-to-end process. Let's map how this looks sequentially within the APICS process architecture. This flowchart illustrates the workflow. Step 1. The process begins with forecasting to establish a baseline. Step 2. That baseline feeds into demand planning, where human intelligence adjusts the numbers. Step 3. The aligned plan feeds into S&OP, integrating supply and finance. The primary rule here is that forecasting is not a parallel activity. It is a tool used inside of demand planning. Without steps 2 and 3, the baseline forecast from step 1 remains an isolated, unactionable piece of data. Let's ground this in a concrete example. Imagine a beverage company planning next month's production. First, the system predicts a baseline of 100,000 bottles. We apply inputs. Marketing adds a 20% promotion. Sales adds 10% for a new customer. Supply reports a 5% capacity constraint. The baseline transforms into a consensus plan of 125,000 bottles. Look at that 25,000 unit delta. Relying on the statistical forecast alone would have resulted in massive stockouts and lost revenue. This brings us to a few pervasive industry traps you will face in a professional supply chain environment. First is the misconception highlighted here that a forecast equals a demand plan. The forecast is merely one single data input among many. Second is the idea that demand planning is just adjusting numbers in a spreadsheet. It is a rigorous, cross-functional decision-making process. Third, and perhaps most dangerous, is the belief that a better forecast means we don't need planning. Future uncertainty is inherent. Because of this, forecasts are always wrong. Planning systems exist precisely to absorb that variance. This directly answers our initial accuracy paradox. Even if your forecast is 95% accurate, demand planning is required to handle the 5% volatility, negotiate operational constraints, and align departmental goals. Now, when we shift to the manager's lens, we see where high-performing companies actually focus their executive time. While forecasting systems run in the background to improve raw accuracy, managers spend their time on collaboration, scenario planning, and balancing trade-offs between service levels and operational costs. Let's summarize the entire concept. Forecasting is the attempt to accurately predict demand. Demand planning is the strategic decision of what demand the organization will commit to fulfilling. Math gives us the baseline, but human alignment drives the supply chain forward.